everyone. Welcome back to the Imperfect Podcast. I'm your host, Kirsten Pfeiffer, and today I am joined by the one and only Cameron Scott. He's my dear friend from South Africa, and we met 6 years ago? I don't know, time flies. But we met in acting class, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
So, welcome, Cam.
Hey kids, it's really, really cool to be here. And I'll say that I know a lot of people start with that, but I think it's really cool having seen Imperfect start from even before it started, and then being here now and chatting to you on it is really, really cool for me.
Yeah.
You know? Especially because we chatted when I was in South Africa about what you're thinking of naming your podcast, the process behind Imperfect, shared a lot of the opening episodes. And I just think being here is kind of really cool and really surreal. And I think I run a unit that does podcasts back in South Africa. And I always tell the team, you got to do what Imperfect does. So if there's ever a standard that I tell them to adhere to, it's this one. So
I paid him to say that, everyone.
She Venmo'd me.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I can start with a really cool, funny story. I remember it was a couple of years back. We went to Side Chick or something.
Sweet Chick.
Shout
out to Sweet Chick. Everyone at our church goes there back in the day, before COVID times.
Yeah, rip.
The glory days. Continue.
They call it BC. I think that's the official quote. Before COVID.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, it's brilliant.
That's so funny.
I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah, but we had fries, which I don't know why I have Side Chick stuck in my mind. Maybe that's
Sweet Chick.
No, I know the restaurant was called.
Do you have some side chicks, Cam?
If they're fries, maybe. But I mean, we ordered those fries. Do
you know what a side chick is?
I do know what a side chick is.
Okay, this is a different tangent that we can get into later.
We're South African. Damn.
We're gonna crack open Cam's love life, but continue.
Oh yeah, that's actually one of the headings for this podcast. But yeah, when we went to Sweet Chick, Side Chick would have been such a better name. Okay, I'm gonna just stay on track. We ordered fries, and I remember we ordered fries, and then afterwards you're like, Cam, what's your Venmo? I was like, why? And you're like, I'm gonna split the fries with you. And I remember getting home and I looked at my Venmo and it was $1 fries. And I was like, Kirsten is amazing.
I blame my parents because growing up, my parents always said, even as an 8-year-old, if I was going out to dinner and my friends' parents were taking me out to dinner, they were always offer to pay. But I realized now, it kind of was offensive. It might have been offensive because I'm this 10-year-old saying to my friends' parents, let me pay for my dinner. And they're like, what the heck? You're 10. But all that to say, it was now it's just ingrained in me, which now, okay, this is I don't have many dudes on my podcast. So there's some things that I would love to pick a guy's brain about.
Here we go. I've been trapped, everybody. Here we go. Okay, I'm ready. Go
sometimes I feel and it's so different now because of feminism roles being changing the dating game. But I do think an element of chivalry still should exist in dating.
Oh yeah.
My friend last night was I'm a feminist, but also feminists ruin dating for everyone. I still want a guy to open the door for me and pay and whatever. But is it offensive? I always offer to pay on dates. Is that offensive? Is that kind? I always get whenever the bill comes, I literally get so uncomfortable because
I feel you're not alone there. I get uncomfortable.
I'm when the bill comes. I'm gonna offer to pay, but then some guys get offended about that, and then other guys are. It's just a. I don't know why it's such an uncomfortable situation.
Yeah.
I think maybe because I'm a people pleaser and I'm how can I be perfect in this situation?
That's why it killed me when I saw the fries on the Venmo. It was fries $1.50.
But it's okay, but that was with friends, it's no brainer for me. I'm just gonna offer. But when it's a date, I'm what are your thoughts?
Thoughts go both ways because first of all, I want to unpack what chivalry means, in terms of where that actually comes from. Mm-hmm. So recently I read a really cool book, which was written in 1909 by a Japanese dude about Bushido, the Japanese, the code of the samurai.
Okay.
It's 7 fundamental principles that define their chivalry. Bushido is chivalry in Japan.
Okay.
In feudal Japan. And the opening chapters of the book kind of compare it to, I think it's gentilhomme in France and the Knights of England, which form the Chivalry System. And get this, the reason chivalry started is because there were a bunch of very powerful, very intelligent people who went into a land and they ruled that land by saying to the people, I can control people. I can control an army. They listen to me. And in doing so, I can make us all safe. And in exchange, all of you guys pay homage to me. I become like your ruler, right? So early like kings or barons or fiefdoms, right? And then they kind of realized they had this problem because the way that they kept control was through the biggest, brutalist, savage, most dominating men around, right? There were these strong warriors. Yeah. And these guys weren't that bright, and they weren't, the only thing that they were really good at was killing and taking things. So the rulers thought to themselves, we need a system to implement and put in place that these guys will hold themselves up to a higher standard than just savagery. And that's exactly what led to this chivalry system. So that's why it was like, no, you must honor people. No, you must treat women like ladies. You must aspire to be this gentle man. Even if your lineage comes from a savage line of warriors that is bloodlust, right? So when they say chivalry is dead, I'm like, well, that's because we're not running around with swords. Well, I mean, we do that in different ways now with like the savagery of like people in business and ethics and all that other stuff. But on the one hand, I agree with the fact that, and I ascribe to this. I mean, when I was growing up, me and my friends, we always used to call ourselves the gents because we had this like little pact, this little code that we wanted to uphold and treat women and young women and the women that we were pursuing with the biggest amount of dignity and respect that we could, even if that was like limiting to us. Do you know what I mean? And we still do that today. Shout out Ayanda. But one of the big things that I think has changed and should change is things like paying on dates. So for example, I'm always flattered when a girl wants to, split a check or like sometimes the girl's like, I don't want to pay the full check, It's not that I'm like, oh, that's offensive to me. It's just like, if that's what they want to do, then that's okay. I will obviously, I mean, it's not like I don't like the check doesn't come and I'm like, I don't look at that person for any sort of contribution. But if that person like wants to contribute, wants to actually be there, and I can see that's a genuine thing. It's not just me offering to pay. Right.
Because that's the other thing. I think sometimes girls do that just out of like politeness, but they're expect the guy
to be like that. Yeah.
Which like, I don't know, because I think that part of like the pursuit, like I believe and want like a guy to pursue me, right? I think it should be mutual in a way, but I think like the guy should initiate with clarity. Sure. And I mean, it's just like, I know everyone has this different opinions about it, so I don't want to offend anyone by that.
I'll offend people.
But that's like, we're both Christian too, and like, you don't have to believe what we believe, but like what I believe and like what the Bible says is like that the man should pursue, right? And like that should lead. That doesn't mean that like he should dictate everything the woman does and control. Like it should be like equal, like equally yoked, and there should be mutual respect. But I also think that it's the man's job to make the woman feel like safe, And so, and I think a lot of that in modern day comes down to like being really intentional. Like it doesn't have to be like, oh, I need someone to protect me. It's like, no, I just need someone to make me feel like safe in a world that, especially in this city, Los Angeles, hugely. Like it feels unsafe at times, like the dating world here. So,
and it's hugely so. I mean, I have friends, and it's horrible, and that's kind of what it sticks out to me, because what you just said is so beautiful, and I believe that's the intention. And if you give anything to, I'm going to say men, but I mean women as well. If you give anything to mankind, they're going to mess it up. You know what I mean? And even with chivalry, like in the book, it talks about how some samurai in Japan, they took the creed and the tenet of honor in the code, and they took that way too far. You know what I mean? Like there's a famous story where a peasant approached a samurai and he flicked a flea off the samurai's back. And the samurai turned around, drew his sword, and killed the guy. Wow. And then the people next to him were like, why did you do that? He's like, because he implied that a flea would land on me. Wow. You know what I mean? And that's like dishonoring my name. Right. So it's like, and I think going back to the money thing, in especially in LA, I had such a cool chat with a friend the other day. It was like, dude, you don't want to pursue a girl who's going to like wreck you before you even know that you like her. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? It's like, well, dating culture now, it's like you ask this girl to go out, and then And then if you don't take her out to like these top tier restaurants and like really blow her, like rock her socks off, you know, then it's not, you don't even have a chance. You know, it's like, I heard this one girl say, you know, he took me to BJ's, and then everyone was like, what's wrong with BJ's? And I was like, what's wrong with In-N-Out? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and
you know what's funny? This is like such a tangent, but BJ's is like like where I grew up. It's like a Costco. So whenever I know it's a restaurant. So anyone listening, like that's like a restaurant in LA.
It's a restaurant.
But whenever I hear something like that, I'm like, oh, he took her to like a grocery store wholesale, and that would be it. Continue. I just
no, that would be a red flag. That would be a flare. No, I back that. But for me, if you look back at the intentionality, like you said, and that's I think the key word.
Yeah. The
intentionality of the fact that a guy must make you feel safe as a woman. It's got nothing to do with your financial situation. It's got nothing to do with your status. You know what I mean? And that to me is the most troubling part about the dating landscape right now.
Right.
Is for me, where I come from and where I grew up, when you first took someone on a date, it's like, I just want to get to know you. You know what I mean? And I think even, especially in America, and you can fully correct me if I'm wrong, there's almost like, there's a physical expectation when you go on a date. You know what I mean? There's no such thing of like, let's just get to know each other. Like, let's just relax. Like, let's just tranquilo, like chill. You know what I mean? There's always this, like even Netflix and chill, you know, it's not Netflix and chill, you know?
Right.
And I think that's where the intentionality becomes tricky, because I've seen a lot of guys use financial leverage as just that, as manipulation almost, you know, I paid for your meal, like I deserve a kiss at the end of the night, or, you know, like I did this, or I picked you up, or I took you to this restaurant, you know?
And I also think like as women, like, and I'm really passionate about this because like I said, the narrative like has changed a lot. And I think that it's amazing that like women are being empowered to like step out of these like roles that have been put on us. But I think sometimes, like you said earlier, like with anything, it can move in like a different extreme, right? So like this is a different conversation of like my problems with like the women empowerment movement as it's portrayed in the media sometimes. I'll get into that in a minute, but I think as women, like generally speaking, a lot of women I know are people pleasers because it's like, just be nice, like and Erin our acting coach has talked about this in acting class so many times of like, women have the hardest time showing rage in scenes because like you've been told rage is not ladylike, and men have been told to not be sensitive. So male actors have a hard time being emotional in scenes because of how we've been conditioned by society. So when you bring that into the dating scheme, it's like the dating scene.
It is a scheme, guys. Make no mistake. Dating is a capitalist.
Freudian slip there. The dating scene where if a guy takes me out on a nice date, I've been there before where I'm like, oh gosh, like I'm a people pleaser. So I'm like, what does he expect? Like what? And I feel guilty for like not giving that because I feel, you know what I mean? And it's like, and it can be just like not even spoken. It can not even be the guy's intention, right? But just because of the like these like narratives that we've been given and the ways that women have been like generally conditioned by society, because even though we are in this time of like women's empowerment, like we still live in a patriarchal society. Society. Those systems of injustice still exist, and they're called systems because it's ingrained. It's ingrained. So sometimes it's hard to see the ways in which we've like allowed those systems to be like autopilot for the norms in society, whether it be in dating or the
workplace,
you know,
or whatever. Yeah. I feel one of the biggest challenges about adapting, or not even adapting, but like understanding American culture in particular, is navigating that line, the dating line. Because it's like, where I come from, you want to make sure that whoever you're pursuing and whoever you're courting does feel safe and does feel secure. But where I come from is a very, I'm going to say like unsafe physically place. So like we place more emphasis on making sure someone feels
physically safe,
you know?
Yeah.
And I think here I've always, just the way that I've been raised and the way that I've grown up talking about what I was saying with like that gents code, is it's tricky because I get the sense that some people might actually like want to be pursuing me, but I'm like I'm not pushing that off, but like for me, if I return that reciprocation, it's almost like I'm stepping into a place where I grew up. I'm heading more in the direction of using you. You know what I mean?
In what way? Because I actually think sometimes like it's okay for a woman to show the first sign. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Actually, Aaron talks about this. He's like, a lot of time, like the woman actually makes the first move a lot of times, whether you know it or not. It could be like in a bar, like the girl like making eye contact with the guy, inviting you over,
Exactly.
right? It's like this. One of my favorite podcasters, Kat Harris, I've had her on the podcast. She talks about this concept of like dropping the hanky, where like back, you know, it's like the woman would drop the hanky
and I'm gonna snatch it
so
up.
the guy can pick it up, and then, you know, but the woman gave something for an invitation, an open door. So I think it's okay for a woman to like show that, whatever that looks like for you, right? Exactly. It could be like now in social media world, it could be like sliding into someone's DM, liking some photos, whatever.
I hate DM culture.
Right. Well, like, yeah. But just, that's a whole different podcast episode. But you know what I mean? I think, but then it's like, I've fallen into, the guy's just like insecure, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
He's not ready.
Not ready or whatever. You make excuses for people. So it's like, yeah, you can make that first step, but then if it's not reciprocated and there's not that like mutual respect, then you have to just like,
you have to walk away. I think the hardest thing for a guy is understanding those signals. I mean, I can't believe this like stood out for me so big. I was in a club in South Africa once, just after, actually the year that I met you. It was quite a rough year for me overall that year. But I was out with my friends.
Was it rough because you met me? I'm kidding.
Maybe.
That year I met you, that was really
rough.
That
was a rough year. Like I saw Kiss in 5, I was like, oh shh. But you know, I was out with my friends, and I just remember this guy coming up to this girl, and she was like, you know, trying to move away from him and whatever, and he just like pulled in and he like kissed her, right? And like she kissed him back, like proper. She kissed him back, and then they kind of like split, and because his friends were like leaving, so they pulled him like away. And as they walked past me, the guy says, "Oh, dude, I'm so happy that like I took that next step." You know what I mean? You know, but hear me out. And then the girl, I looked at her, and she starts crying. And then like her friends come over, and they're like, "What's wrong?" She's like, "Oh no, I'm just like really stressed because of this happened." And I'm like, that to me is the burden of this whole dating system as a guy, because if you read those signs wrong. You know what I mean? Like I will put that person's, even if I fail, like I'll put the signals I'm getting from that person first.
Right. But it's like, in that situation with the club, it's like, if he was taking some like nonverbal cue as his invitation to go do that, it's like, there needs to be there's a step he went from step A to step like D. Because I've been in situations where I've been like advanced on, and you're like, like what do I do? And like I didn't send any signal. I don't know if I'd go as far as like making out with someone when they were like attacking, but like I've been close to that, to be quite honest, like earlier in my life. And so I don't know, there's so much nuance with all of this, but I think what it comes down to on either side is like sensitivity and mutual respect. It's like, okay, for that guy going up into the club, what mutual respect would have looked like is like, how are my actions going to affect this person? Like, let me make sure that they feel safe. Why don't I just go have a conversation with her? That would be taking the next step. Right. He was still feeding some kind of like ego thing or serving like himself, you know? I think it comes down to like this service mentality of like, how can I serve this other person? It doesn't mean like going to like make out with them because that's what he wanted. It goes down to like, let me make sure she feels safe, and that's the next step, right? And I think that when there's any kind of miscommunication, because there's been a lack of intentionality, a lack of communication, which is a lot harder. You know, it's a lot easier said than done. We were talking about this earlier this week, but just like having those like difficult conversations that you have to have, I think sometimes in every relationship, in order for you to get to like the next level of depth and intimacy in that relationship, whether it be a friendship or a romantic relationship, like you're gonna have to have hard conversations. And a lot of times people don't want to have it. So they just avoid or leave, you know, or let like that miscommunication fester.
Perpetuate. I think the hardest thing for me in particular is like seeing, having the ability, and I know I can talk to you about this as an empath. When you're empathetic with somebody, you can sense what stresses them out. Like that.
Cam was like kicking the stand. I'm just like the sound. I could hear it.
Oh, sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
When you sense what stresses somebody out, you want to like avoid that. And a lot of people will take, I think that on the flip side of that as well, like what you said is absolutely true. You need to be willing to have those hard conversations. And then at the same time, a lot of people just want to feel safe.
Right.
You know what I mean? They want to retain that sense of like, I don't want to grow, so I'm going to try and keep things here. And I feel like that becomes a very difficult and hard place for both people because you just keep them there.
Well, it's like interesting because we're talking about these hard conversations. I think a lot of times those conversations don't have to be hard, right? Like it just, I think the idea of any kind of confrontation makes you think it's going to be a hard conversation.
Let's play an association game.
What does that mean?
So I'm going to say a word, and you're going to, and then after in your turn, you say a word to me, and you say the first thing that comes into your mind. You're not allowed to wait even a second.
Okay.
Confrontation.
No. Scary.
Okay, cool. Go ahead. My turn.
Oh, pretzels.
Chocolate.
We have chocolate-covered pretzels here that Cam has been wanting to play some kind of game with. I don't know if this is what it is, but that's where...
No, she doesn't know yet, but she's going to enjoy the game as much as none of us want to eat chocolate pretzels, but we all really do. Okay. Imperfect.
My podcast.
Okay, fair.
Relationships.
Scary.
Interesting. I feel like we have to unpack some therapy here with Cam.
All right. Okay, let's go.
Are we continuing to play the game?
We can. Okay. I mean, but you said you wanted to unpack, so I was like, oh, let's just like lead with
No, well,
I got one. Last one for you.
Okay.
Intimacy. First word.
Respect. No.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think respect.
Okay.
Okay. We can continue with this later. We can get down many rabbit holes, so I got to keep the plane on track, okay? What I really wanted to talk to you about was, and this is going to feel like a rapid shift from what we were just talking about, but like seasons of waiting. And the reason why I think like you're a great person to talk to about this is because I'll let you explain, actually. Your plan was to come to LA. So Cam goes back and forth between LA and South Africa. Your plan was to move back to LA before 2020 or during 2020?
Way before.
And then obviously the pandemic pushed things back. And so throughout the pandemic and like the last 2 years, like we talked a lot about like that, just having to have patience and trust when you're meant to come here and you will, even though you had different plans. And even though I wasn't waiting for something like as tangible as that, I think we've connected in the sense that like when we're also actors, like there's a lot that you can't control in your career. There's a lot you can control and work towards, but certain doors are only going to be opened until I believe God opens them, right? And like whatever that is for you. But I want to just talk a little bit about that because I think a lot of people, whether they're waiting to come from South Africa to LA or you know, like we're supposed to get married during 2020 and then they couldn't have their wedding. Like there's so much waiting that happened for people that it became very frustrating. And I think a lot of people are still trying to grapple with like the aftermath of that. So I think anyone listening, it might be benefit them to hear your story because now you are in LA and I've just watched how you've endured that journey with so much patience. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit about what your plans were and kind of where you are now?
Sounds good. And thank you for that lead-in, by the way. That was really, really cool to see that recognized. And you're absolutely right. I think it's been a particularly challenging season when it comes to when your plans are delayed. You know, I think especially in this entertainment industry, a lot of people will think that they set these timelines for themselves. I want to be here at this point. I want to be here at this point. I want to do this by this point. I want to book this by this point. And actually...
Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you. I just had a funny, like, to support what you're saying.
Right.
When I was in UCLA, I was majoring in business economics because I was like, if I don't book things, if I'm not a successful actress in 4 years, then I'm just going to work in finance. That's a funny joke.
Yeah, how's it going? Happy 8th year, by the way.
I was just in New York, and I was
love
staying in the financial district, and like I would just walk down to Wall Street and like watched all these people, and I'm like, oh my gosh, thank you that I'm not here. Continue.
No, but honestly, it's true.
But we make our plans, and then you realize it's a good thing that things didn't turn out the way we planned sometimes.
Exactly. So, and that's exactly what God did in my life, and He continues to do. And the biggest thing that I'll lead as almost the introductory paragraph to this whole onset is when it's God's plans, there's peace and there's enjoyment and there's so much growth that happens. When it's our plans, waiting becomes hard. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, and on a Christian level, on a relationship level, like it's not even too big of a segue, right? Because everybody, I hate to say this, and a lot of people get offended when I say this about relationships, but either you're going to date someone and it's going to be that person, and then hopefully someone that it will never end. All relationships end in one of two ways. They end or they don't.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And like a lot of people get offended when I say that. They're like, you can't put that pressure on somebody that you just met. And I'm like, I don't want to put pressure on anybody. Yeah. You know, I mean, if it ends, then it's probably better that it ends, because then you just go your separate ways, you know?
And that's like the reason why, honestly, like, I was talking about this with a lot of my like single girlfriends last night who are all like amazing catches. If there's any guys out there, I can hook you up. Like, I have the best. I should be a matchmaker.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I'm down to meet some of these amazing.
Yeah, we'll talk people after this. But like the thing that you get, like all of them get, and like all of us get, is like, why are you single? Like, you can date anyone you want. Blah blah.
I get the opposite as a guy.
Really?
Yeah, I get, dude, do you know how many girls you could go for? Like, bro, you could get in there. Like, you could just, you could absolutely dominate this space. And I'm like,
no, that's not the opposite. It's like the same thing. It's like, why are you single? Like, you could be dating anyone you want.
No, they don't want me to date. They just want me to be frolicking.
Oh, okay. I took that all as the same, but no. The point is I have been single for so long because I have that mindset of like, I'm looking for, can I see a future with this person when I'm dating? If not, then it's just going to end in heartbreak. If I can see a future, and that's not to put pressure on like, oh, this is definitely my husband.
This is my husband.
But it's like, if it could be, then like, yeah, let's explore that. Like we were talking about earlier, like dating doesn't have to be this like scary big thing. It's like, let's get to know each other and continue to explore this. But if I don't see myself with this person long term and it's just like a fun distraction for me, then like, it's just going to end in heartache and also like waste my time.
Wait, that's a huge one for me right now.
So huge. It's like, I don't know, that's just kind of like a tangent, because it is true. It's like, and with dating, then that means you have to wait longer if you have that intentionality mindset, right? So it does get back to what we're talking about. But
and it's a big thing, especially now I'm like 26, which I love every age that I've been. You know, when I first came to LA, I was 19 years old. And I loved the fact that I was 19 and in LA. Everyone was like, you're such a young buck.
I
like,
know.
You're such a baby.
I kind of miss it. I was always the youngest one in my acting class. And then like, I just was like the baby of the class. And now I'm like, oh shit.
Oh, I'm getting older.
Yeah.
You know, but there's a beauty in that as well. Like I still consider myself very, very young, you know, and especially in the world and the game that we are. Like I'm just getting started. I've been in it 10 plus years as an actor, 7+ as a producer, 5 as a director, 11 as a writer, and I'm just getting to the starting line. You know what I mean? Like I just took my first steps off. But going back to that waiting game, when I booked Kissing Booth 3 and I got on set the first day, I just remember getting on my knees in the trailer and being like, Lord, thank you so much. This did not come earlier. Because, and I know this sounds so bizarre to so many people, but it's like, if you're not ready for something, you might think that you are, but you're not. Yeah. You know? And it is way worse to have that and not be able to stop. Like he's like a brother to me, and he's also my business partner. His name's Kagiso Rabada. He's one of the number 1 bowlers for cricket in the world. And he said to me, one of the things that is really scary about when you get in front is that you can't look behind. You can't see who's coming up behind you. Wow. And you can't see anything else but ahead. Wow. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're so goal orientated, if you're like, oh, I'll be here by this time and this time, what happens when you succeed? You know? And so for me, about patience and it was hard. It was so hard. It still is. Still, just because you come to LA, like even I'd be lying if I said there was a part of my head that didn't go, okay, when you come to LA, things start like swooping up, you know? Right. And again, there's just a a complete peace in the fact of when my pursuit is to be the best person, the best individual that I could be in my career right now, in this point, and use that for the purpose in which I'm in it. There's a fulfillment every single day.
Right. And I think so much anxiety comes when it's like, when you're like you were saying, like you make all these plans and then I got it this time and I got this accomplishment by this time. If you're hitting those marks, I feel like you're increasingly like walking on this tightrope of like carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders of like, well, this is all because of me. So like, I got to keep doing everything perfectly so that I don't fall. Right. But when you're in a space of like having to surrender your plans, whether that be because of a pandemic or whatever. And that's like what we believe as Christians is like to surrender like your own plans and trust that God's plans are better. That has given me so much peace too, because again, I'm like, thank God my plans didn't work out the way I wanted them to.
Oh yeah.
And then when things get messed up, then you don't have that like burden on you either of feeling like all of your plans are squashed because you know that you're not the one in control.
I was just looking at the bookshelf behind. I was seeing if there was a book here that's called The Art of Acting by Stella Adler.
Yeah.
And it ties exactly into what you're saying. It's like, go ahead.
One other thing I was going to say is
I love listening to Kirsten. It's really cool.
One other thing I was going to say that actually our acting coach that I keep talking about, Aaron, has said before, I think it was Aaron, whatever. So one of my like very influential acting people said this to me, but that there's a luck ball, so to speak, like it's a metaphor, a ball, like this big beach ball, think of it, that bounces around Los Angeles in the industry. And he's like, eventually it will land on you. Like your luck and that open door will come. The question is, for most people, it's either too early or too late. So too early in the sense of like what you were getting at before was you're not prepared either as an actor. So say you book this huge movie, but your skills aren't where you're at to be at that level, honestly, because then you're going to audition for every other big thing after that.
Like, oh, you're the guy who flopped, you know?
Right. Well, it's like you're now on that caliber where you're up against like we were just talking about Jake Gyllenhaal before, like you're up against like the Jake Gyllenhaals of the world. But Jake Gyllenhaal has been doing this for decades and like has done so many movies, and his craft is at a place where he can handle those opportunities. If you're still so new and so green and then you get that luck, you're not going to be able to sustain the opportunities that come your way as an actor. And then also like if you're not developed enough as a human being to be able to, and like your character is not where it needs to be able to sustain the pressure that comes with that also even more so, I would say, is more detrimental because that's like a soul thing, you know? And I'm going to quote the Bible again, like whether you believe in it or not, it's just, I think it's wisdom. It's like, what would it profit a man to gain the whole world, but to lose his soul? And that's why you hear so many really successful people that either commit suicide or, you know, like feel empty when they're standing on that stage accepting that award because they've attached their value in when I get that thing, then I'm going to feel fulfilled. And then they get that thing and they're still the same person that they always were. And then they're like, oh shoot, like I got this. I thought this was going to fill some void. What now? And so I think like in that waiting process, we have an opportunity to work on the things that matter and work on the things that no acting role, no Oscar, no relationship can take away or add to, you know, like if you have that foundation, then everything else is just icing on the cake and it's something that can be sustained.
Absolutely. I saw that in 3 very distinct examples on the Kissing Booth set. Like Joey King is exactly that example. Her IMDb is like 60 plus credits. She's been doing this since young. She deserves everything about where she's at. You know what I mean? Professionally, she's ready for it. You know, like she's still young, but like she's there. You know what I mean? And that's something that you got to aspire to. You got to aspire to, I'm going to put in the work every single day. And then yes, the luck ball will hit you on the head. Right. You know what I mean?
But you have to put the work in, knowing whether it hits you or not, you know?
I'm still in class every week. You're reading every week. You're watching every week. You know?
And then that's where it's like, it cracks me up when people are like, oh, overnight success. Because like they say that, but it's like, you didn't see the last 10 years of hard work and like how many times I almost gave up, like how many times I called my parents crying. Like no one sees that. And then they're just like, here's the luck ball, hit you, overnight success. And then the other side of the luck ball is like it will land on you too late where you've already given up, you know, like that opportunity, you know.
Oof,
so
both of those are tragic. Too early, too late. Ooh.
Yeah. Well, and you've talked about before, I'm not going to lie, like there have been so many times where I've called Cam and I'm like, what am I doing? This is so stupid. And you said something about like the 98% of people
giving up.
Yeah. I don't know. There's some statistics.
There's some statistics that I know. So one of the things, and just to tie a bow on what you were saying about waiting, is one of the biggest lessons I learned is, okay, I'm waiting, but what am I waiting for? You know? And again, in the Bible, there's a wisdom in like, wait on the Lord. Like, that's so beautiful. You know what I mean? Like when he says go, I'll go. Like when he says stay, I'll stay, you know?
And like the peace that comes with that.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? Because I'm like the most, I overthink and I doubt and I whatever. As I've grown in my relationship with God, I think that's lessened because I know that like I have something greater to attach my confidence to. But before that, I was like, I don't know, like, should I move to LA? Like, should I go to UCLA or should I go to USC? Like, just like every single thing, I like carried that weight of the world on my shoulders. Continue. So I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's okay. It's your podcast.
It is. Make that clear.
I know.
Also, Cam is like my brother if no one has sensed that yet. So I say I'm not a mean person. I can only be sassy with
I love the
people
sassiness.
that I love. So
the sassiness is there. Oh, just like, sorry, I'm going to stop. But one of the hardest things and coolest things I encountered when I left LA in 2018 and I came back this year in 2021 and had a global pandemic, several movies and opportunities in between and lots of waiting, was that when I came back, I was like, wow, I'm like ready for that next step. You know what I mean? And it kind of put me in the perspective of if I go back and I have to wait even longer until like there's clearance for the appropriate visas, or if I don't, move at all, whatever that looks like for God, then I'm for it. Because when I came back, it was so clear to me in terms of the network and the people that I connected with who had grown and who had stayed. And always there's growth, there's huge growth in waiting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And there should be, and I always use, and we were talking about this the other night. It's like, you sow the ground, and I think when you sow that, when you don't judge every day by the harvest that you take in, you judge every day by how many seeds you plant. And if you think about it, it's such a beautiful image because when you plant a seed in this world today, we're so instantaneous of like success.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, instant now with 20% more corn, like you plant your success seed and it's just gonna now with 20% more success or whatever.
Yeah.
Whereas in actual fact, it's like there's a big barren nothing and you go there, you plant everything and you just wait.
Right.
You tend to it every day, you water it.
Yeah.
There's nothing that comes out of that ground. Like, and if you know anything about like gardening and stuff, like one of the slowest parts of growth, but one of the most key and important one is like the roots, like the way that a seed takes root and then it curls up and then it breaks through the soil. And then after that, you can see the growth, you can see the potential. Right. But it's growing even when you can't see it.
Yeah. And when the seed, and I definitely didn't make this up, I've heard this so many times, but like when the seed is planted and the roots are growing, what does that feel like to the seed? Like if the seed could feel painful, dark, like, cold, like all those things. So it's like in these seasons of waiting, it can feel painful. It can feel dark. It can feel like I don't know I don't see anything, right? And then all of a sudden you start to see a little light as you're breaking through the ground. And why did they call it breakthrough? You're literally breaking through, and so, but the thing is then you have those roots to...
This Cam's mic drop. I was going to drop the mic, but they're expensive.
No, you made me lose my train of
thought.
thought.
I was so excited. I was backing you there.
It's called breakthrough for a reason is what I was going to say. And then also what I was going to add on to planting seeds. The interesting thing is sometimes we see the fruit of that, right? But there's some seeds that you plant that you actually will never see the fruit of because, and I think like the purpose of, everyone talks about my purpose and like we attach that to our career and like our money and all those things. And there's nothing wrong. Those things are great. But I believe that our purpose is to love other people and relationships, right? And so when you think of all the people that you have come across in like your whole life, and especially someone like you that goes from like country to country, like we're always encountering people that you might never see again, but that one act of kindness, that one act of encouragement, that one seed that you sowed, that you might not ever know like how that changed the course of someone else's life. Like that's the point of life, I think, is like how we can leave things better than when we found them, whether it benefits us or not. And so I think sometimes, and that's what's helped me through seasons of waiting, is like, yeah, I'm waiting on these like big dreams, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think sometimes I miss my opportunity to have an impact today because I miss the person that's standing right in front of me because I'm so in my head with my blinders on of what's next. But it's like, why don't I just like smile and say hi to the person at the grocery store that's bagging my groceries and ask how their day's going, because you might be the first person or only person all day that does that, you know? And so, and I know when I was working in a restaurant, which like, I have so much respect for servers. It's such a hard job. And my job there was to serve people, right? But when someone like intentionally served me in the sense of making me feel dignified and seen and just like valued, that made my whole night. And so it's just little things like that where you never know how much your kindness can impact another person.
And I think I'm going to kind of turn the tables on you a little bit here. With what you've done with Imperfect as a podcast, like I know how much work it is. I know how hard it is and how much of a seed it can be. But I don't think even yet you will know how much these episodes and these topics and this insight will do for other people.
Oh, thank you. Like I said, I paid him to say all this.
Didn't.
Kidding.
Paid me $150 for the prize. But there's a couple things I wanted to go back to. One of them was you said like, and people they're so hooked up on my purpose, my truth. You know what I mean? And it's like, for me, and again, I know it's just, I just love Jesus. So. But it's like God's purpose. As soon as I switched gears into that and took that away from myself, you know what I mean? And it's true, even in those 3 years, like Kingdom Come, our production company, wouldn't have started. I wouldn't have done the calling card, which I came back, which was Beast. Wouldn't have done the kissing booth, all these things, you know? As soon as you switch that mentality from like mine to God, you know, everything grows. You need that direction as a seed in the dark to know where you're growing towards.
Yeah.
And I know this is another parable, but like where the seeds are thrown, you know, some people, they know, and you'll know in your heart, like where you need to be.
Yeah.
And if I had stayed on in Los Angeles, it would have been sowing seeds in ground that would not have been fruitful. You know what I mean? For that time period that I needed to be away, you know?
Yeah.
And like, so where you are also is like, it's so important because some of those seeds will be like rocky ground. Some of it will be like exactly, and you want to find that soil so that when you do, you know, you can, that luck ball comes, you know, like luck balls and plants. That I think what this kind of ties into, and I'm happy that it does, is because we've been talking about this a lot, this notion of hope. And I think I've been thinking about that a lot because as much as we've talked about dating and waiting.
That's going to be the name of this episode.
Dating and waiting, folks.
Yeah.
There's this element of hope that I wanted to talk to you about. Like, what does hope mean for you?
It's interesting because I actually was journaling about this morning because, like, in full transparency and vulnerability, I've been in a really tough season. I shared this in some previous episodes, but just with like physically, when I got into my accident and like the injuries and just I was not able to do anything, and that showed me like how much value that I put on the things that I do, right? And like how that impacts me as a person and my value. And so, you know, like I just think like not being able to do this podcast, not being able to like think as sharply as I usually do, like I just haven't felt like myself. And then there's the physical things that come with having a concussion. Like my neurologist said, like the next few months, like your brain as it's healing, like the chemistry has changed. Like you might feel a little more depressed than you usually would, things like that. Like I just have not felt like myself. So with that struggle, and just like I feel like I'm in a really transitional season right now where like I genuinely don't know what's next. And I feel like God has asked me to like surrender a lot of things, and I have, but like again, I don't know what's next now. And sometimes I felt really excited in that space when I feel like in a transitional season, but to be honest, I'm just like tired. And this is what I was journaling this morning. I don't even feel hopeless. Like I don't feel hopeless, but I don't feel hopeful. I just feel like very neutral, and I think maybe that's a healthy thing. But previously I felt neutral, but like expectant and like excited. I feel neutral right now and like not expectant. I'm just like, well, I've been doing this. I've been here for 8 years. I keep going around the same loop. And so I don't know, because I don't feel really hopeful right now. But at the same time, I do have this depth of like knowing that God is going to provide for me, and that like he has a plan, and that being in this neutral space is probably part of that plan, so that I can just be really clear and open to like whatever is next. And so I think hope is that deep confidence that everything's going to be okay, even when your human emotions don't feel it. Because I've felt that like hope in like a good fuzzy way, right? Where like my emotions are attached to it. But right now the emotions are gone. So I have to dig really deep to like that intangible thing that I can't really articulate, but I just know that I know that I know that like everything's going to be okay.
Oh, so beautiful.
Thank you. It didn't feel beautiful.
And now here's the next follow-up question, which was really hard. I was reading a book called A Hobbit, A Wardrobe, and a Great War. And there's this really, really, really crazy concept that J.R.R. Tolkien, who is one of the people that I really look up to, you know, alongside like Walt Disney and even like George Lucas, you know, and J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who did Narnia, both served in World War I, one of the most horrific wars I think we'll ever see. People say it's the war to end all wars. I think it was in a certain way. But in The Lord of the Rings, he writes, and this is like grossly overlooked. Mm-hmm. In The Return of the King, things get really, really bad for several characters. And the writer, who's like a commentator academically, talking about their journeys and the way that that their lives impacted their work, which defined a century, you know, and even today, you know. He unpacks this idea that hope dies in Lord of the Rings right before the Return of the King comes to its like beautiful, groundbreaking conclusion. And that was really, really hard for me to process, because for me, the hope never died, you know? And I think for everybody who observes someone else's success, the hope never dies. Mm-hmm. But I think when you're living it, there's a point where your hope will die. Mm. And one of your episodes, you guys talked about various forms of insecure attachment. Mm. And I think when you are in your infancy in God's purpose or your purpose or whatever, there's this warm fuzzy hope that keeps you safe. Mm-hmm. It like allows you to make mistakes. Mm-hmm. It allows you to move forward. It allows you to fail and explore. But when you're really committed, you know, and milk turns to meat, for lack of like a better word, and you actually have to go out there and you're no longer having the training wheels on. Mm-hmm. You could fall off your bike and get really hurt, you know. There's a point where it's not that it should, but even if hope dies, it shouldn't affect where you're at, you know.
Yeah.
And I think what you're experiencing now and what so many people, especially in 2020, have experienced, I've experienced, is when hope dies, you really see your metal. You see what you're made of, you know? Yeah. And there's no pressure on that.
Yeah.
You know, there's not supposed to be pressure on that. It's supposed to be about the fact that you know that you know that you know.
Right.
That this is what has to be, and I'm going to give myself to that, even if I fail.
Right.
You know, like, and how, like, it's just so beautiful. And that's exactly what happens in The Return of the King. Yeah. It's like, these guys are like, and I'm sure he drew this from World War I. It's like, I could die today. Right. You know, and everything I've been through could all be for nothing.
But it wouldn't be, you know?
And that's what Gandalf says.
Because it's like getting back to what I said before, like, and this is going to sound really morbid. Don't worry, guys, I'm fine. But it's like, I used to be so scared of dying because I was like, I have all these big things that I still want to do and accomplish. And I know those things are going to happen. But also now I'm like, I'm not scared to die because I'm like, even if those things never came to pass, either because they don't come to pass or because I die tomorrow, I know that I've made an impact already because of how I loved other people.
Yeah.
And that sounds really like cliche and trite. And like, as I said that, I wanted to vomit. Like,
no, man.
As I heard that out loud, it sounds really like
not at all. That's what we're supposed to be doing.
Right. But it's like, I mean, and I'll just use this as an example in closing. It's like, I was talking about every time I come back from visiting my family in New Jersey and I come back to LA, it becomes harder and harder. Not because LA hasn't become more like home for me. Like, I do feel like I found my place here, but it's because I just love my family like so much. I already loved them so much, but every time I spend more and more time with them, I'm just like, I freaking love them so much. And it's so hard to like leave that. But those relationships, and this is what I had this conversation with my grandfather because he's selling his house because his wife passed last year, my grandmom, and he wanted to go see the house one last time. So we took him out of the retirement home. He wanted to see his house. They bought it 60 years ago. And that was like his symbol of like the American dream fulfilled. You know, that was like, he called it the little house on the prairie. And it literally was like out of a movie scene. He like rolled his wheelchair in and he just got in there and just started weeping. And he was like, we had so many beautiful memories here. And he just was so, just like living all of that. And I said to him, Opa, you don't know how many people don't have what you experienced, that love and that richness of relationships and joy and everything you experienced here is why you're feeling that mourning and that grief right now. But the fact that you had that was a gift, like that love that we have every day, like it should be hard to leave, like it should be hard to say goodbye to people because of like how much you love them. And so I don't know where I'm going with this because I'm like on a tangent now, but I think the point I was trying to make is that's what it's all about. Yeah, my grandfather was like really worked his way up from having $5 to like
having a house on the prairie.
Is like fine, like more than fine now, like the hardest worker I know. But he doesn't care. Like he literally was like, take everything. All he wanted to know is that his stuff wasn't thrown out, but he didn't want any of it. He wanted us to take everything. And he just wanted to know that we were okay and that we're taken care of and that him living in his retirement home, that there's enough money to pass down to us that we're going to be okay. Like that's all he cares about now. And that's what it comes down to is that relationship, that love. He doesn't care about his career that he had. He cares about the family he created. And so there's going to come a day in our lives where we're rolling on the wheelchair into our house, seeing 60 years of memories before our eyes. And it's not going to matter the careers that we had. It's going to matter the grandparents that are around us. And like, me sitting there encouraging him and hugging him and saying, Opa, it's okay. You've given us such a good life. And like that to him, having a granddaughter say that to you, that is success. That is love. That is the point of life, right? And like how he's then gone and enabled me and empowered me to now be living my dream. Like the sacrifices that him and my grandma made are allowing me to sit here today and have this conversation with you.
So beautiful. Kid.
If I die tomorrow, I'll be okay because I'll have those relationships. And like that, like I'm still so young and I have such a full life to live, but I could getting to that place of like freedom of like detached from what the next thing is.
Expectations. Well, that's what it is, right? What you just said is like when God's hand is over your life and you've committed that to him, there's a parable in Proverbs that says, not a parable, just a proverb that says, commit your plans to the Lord and they will succeed. Like God never fails. Yeah. What does God call us to do? Love. Yeah. So it's not like that feeling where you're like, oh, I can't believe I just said that. It's true. Yeah. Because that love is what was the root of all of it. Your family, what you give into like your career, what you do in your work, the sacrifices that you make, all out of love. If they're not, then something's wrong.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of it's a shallow place to work from, and it's a painful place to work from when you're not doing it out of love, because then it becomes.
Then when hope dies,
yeah,
the seed dies.
right.
You know?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Well, I think that is a great place to wrap things up. We could keep talking for hours, but I'm just going to close this with one question for you. If you could leave listeners with one nugget of wisdom, or just one thing, or one joke, anything, what's your closing remark, Cam? Oh, he's going to pull out the pretzels. My audio engineer is going to hate me for these.
For you. I know this might sound whatever, but like, all glory to God. Live your life every single day without expectation.
Cheers.
Cheers. Chocolate pretzel. Cheers to that. Yeah. Do not rush life, lest life rush you.
Okay, mic drop, pretzel drop, whatever you want to call it. Cam, thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours. You have been such an important part of my journey and on the imperfect journey.
As you, me.
And I just appreciate your friendship, and you're the best, and everyone needs to follow you. Where can they find you besides Casing Booth 3, which is now on Netflix? Where else can they connect with you?
At Cam the Scott on all platforms, CAM the Scott, because I thought that was funny. And at Kingdom Come, that's Kingdom Come with 2 Ks, official for everything that we're doing as a company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
I paid her to say that last part.
Yeah, no, he paid me in chocolate pretzels. Thank you guys, everyone, for listening, and we will see you next week.